you mentioned the Nakba, and so I want to talk about the right of return, which is, uh, since all the Oslo Accords and all the attempts at peace succeeding that, right of return has been, number one sticking point for the folks on the Palestinian side. For Palestinians, it's a right to return to the land from which they were kicked out of and removed from in 1948. And for the Israelis, they see it as a danger to their demographic, to their Jewish majority population. As a Palestinian in the diaspora yourself, you like you said, you were born in Jerusalem and grew up in Gaza. Maybe you could speak about the tug of war of the right of return. Is it something that without Israeli recognition of, are we just going to see a continuation of this kind of stalemate that we see today?
Um, so, the right of return. The right of return is something that Palestinians will not give up. This is something that's very, very deeply entrenched in us, right? That because we are connected to this land, as much as ardent Zionists will say that they are the indigenous population, the only indigenous population. We have a lot of history in this land as Palestinians, and we deserve to be able to come back. Israel has a policy, it's called the law of return, that allows any Jew in the world, any Jew, to come and gain instant citizenship in their country. And
Whether they have lived there or not, whether they've been there or not.
enough, man.
Yeah.
And also, Israel is very good at bringing in immigrants. They've had massive waves of immigrants, and they've adapted and they've created societies based on these immigrants. And so when they talk about the demographic threat, if it were not for this context, it's a very racist way of thinking, demographics, right? Because it's us versus them. And they say, oh, it's a destruction, it's going to be a Holocaust 2.0. And once again, I understand the deep-rooted existential fears. However, you cannot justify occupying people and not letting people come back because you are just scared. You know what I mean? I think the whole demographic thing, and this is something that's the one state solution talks about, is equality. And when people have rights, this is proven, they are statistically, they are not as violent because they don't need to be. So when people tell you, oh, but the Palestinians are going to come back and there's no democracies in the Middle East and they're just going to create I just think that's not true. And maybe, when you look at it from the point of Hamas, sure, Hamas, doesn't and I'm very opposed to the policies of Hamas, and I understand when Israelis consume Israeli media, Hamas is always projected at the forefront, and it's pretty scary to be living on the border and stuff like this. But it's much bigger than that. Because think about it, once you solve the problem, what does Hamas offer? Because they started off as social services. But now they're just a group of corrupt rulers that take money from Qatar, and they're not offering anything to their population. People in Gaza don't like Hamas, and they're not allowed to rebel against Hamas. And I say this, I lived in Gaza. I have people in Gaza that tell me this constantly. They're not representative. So in regards to the right of return, I think that practically speaking, it wouldn't happen just all at once. You're going to have 5 million people come into the country. No, it's a process, right? But you have to start talking about the process. And all these peace plans that we talk about never mention the right of return for Palestinians. This is something that has never been accepted by Israel. And I think that we need to frame it as, why can Jews gain instant citizenship like this, but Palestinians cannot? When they have the same historic claims to the land. You know what I mean?
I think to add on to that point as well, I mean, with the law of return for Jews, I mentioned before, a Jew, say, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, can gain citizenship, never have been to Israel, go to Israel, become a citizen, move and be all happy. However, a Palestinian refugee living in whatever camp you want to say, that is a first generation. That man, that woman used to live within the current borders of Israel, was kicked out in 48. This is a person that is still alive to this day, who lived in a home that is now lived in by Israelis, cannot go back. So I think there's a really unfortunate double standard there that really does not recognize the rights of all the humans, and I think that's a really big shortfall.
Yeah. And also, you know, when you talk to people that have never been, you know, kind of exposed to these ideas, um, there's a talk about Zionism, especially with Israelis. I don't think that the idea of a one-state solution with the right of return and all this stuff requires abandoning Zionism, but I think that it requires a kind of a re-understanding that has been largely forgotten. I think that, and this is from talking to people and studies, the essence of Zionism is not necessarily a Jewish state in the land of Israel, but it's a homeland. It's a thriving Jewish society that offers Jews refuge and enriches the entire Jewish world, right? But I think that we need to start exploring other ways to achieve that goal that don't require subjugating another people. And this is what Peter Beinart talks about in his new article, which is amazing.
Yes,
it's time. He says it's time to envision a Jewish home that is a Palestinian home as well, and it doesn't. You don't need to. It needs to be Jewish enough for the Jews and for Israelis, and Palestinian enough for us, right? And I think that is very, very possible. But and this is something I say. You know, I'm only 19, but now I'm starting to realize that we can make a change. Like, this is now the time where we can start thinking about, okay, what can we do to actually try and change the situation? And a lot of people that are presented with these ideas will be like, oh, well, it's unrealistic and stuff like this. It's because, you know, they haven't expanded their mind like that. States and nation states and countries and borders, they're all human constructs. So we have the ability to create new human and social constructs. We do. It's not impossible. Nothing in this regard is impossible. It's hard, 100%.
It'll be difficult.
And difficult, but it is not impossible. And this is the best thing, or the most fulfilling thing for me when I talk to people, is seeing the hope that I can bring to people when I talk to them about this. Because for so long, you know, us Palestinians, we literally don't have anyone to look up to. We don't. And people will falsely look up to Yasser Arafat as if he was, you know, some sort of beacon of, he was corrupt. He's so corrupt. So we need this new generation to come up and to start pushing new ideas, because a lot of people have never been exposed to these kinds of ideas. They've never thought about a solution. You know, you ask someone, what is the solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict? Like, solution? And I'm not necessarily saying that I have the solution, but I think that we need to start raising awareness, number one, about the injustices and with the occupation and the daily lives of Palestinians, but also thinking about how do we solve these injustices.